So happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm just coming to you. We're going to do our fourth edition of our Listen and Learn. And I have a very special friend of mine, Michael Sodini. He's with us, and he's with Walk the Talk America. And so Michael, a little backstory on us. I met him a couple years ago, and I followed his work for many years because we're in the same circle of friends. And so I finally got to meet him. We struck up a friendship and become partners and supporters of one another. And so I'm really thankful to have him here today to kind of talk about the work that he does and how it relates to what we're doing here in Oregon. And so mental health is something that we all should be paying attention to. We should be looking at our circles. There's always going to be signs when it comes to people that are struggling. It could be a loss of a marriage. It could be a loss of a job. It could be, struggles at home. It could be addiction. These are all things that are signs that, we should be paying attention to and looking out for our friends and our families and the people that we care for. And so I'm just really blessed to have Michael here to kind of talk about, what he does and to give us kind of some things that we can look out for and how we can get involved to help keep people safe. So I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Hey man, thanks for having me on here. And yeah, we do go back a ways now. It's crazy how the time flies, right? Because I remember when I first saw your work and the things you were doing, and I think it's the first time we had you on the podcast, and I was able to say it to you. I was just like, I think you're one of the most underrated people in the industry, that puts in this hard work, because you're never out there bitching, and you just kind of just put on the hard hat and do the work. And I was just like, why? This has got to be on the radar for every gun manufacturer, for every safe manufacturer, for, you know what I mean? People got to see the work you're doing, because that's what we're all about in this industry, is trying to educate people and teach people. And then you provide that service. I know the show is not about you, right? It's about me right now, but I just wanted to give you your flowers and tell you that I'm so proud of where you're at right now. And you just struck that deal, partnership. I'm sure you talked about it, but I'm proud of what you're doing, and, good on you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, brother.
So
about you.
About me, right? So I founded Walk the Talk America in 2018, and here we are today. I never would have guessed that I'd be doing this work, bridging the gap between the firearms industry and the mental health community. Basically, what we do, for anyone that doesn't know, is just popping in here, is we look for innovative ways to get people help when they're in crisis without fear of consequence, right? Originally, when I started this organization, I thought I would just raise money in the gun industry and just hand it over to the mental health community and kind of buy our way out of the negative outcomes, and say, here, we'll provide the money and you go out and do the work. Didn't realize that there were no programs, there were no outreach programs. No one really has an answer to the so-called term gun violence, right? And gun violence could be defined as many different things, which I think it has to be. I hate it when it's all lumped together, but people actually call gun violence, or they equate it to also suicide, right? Which one could argue it could be, it's violence against yourself, but I don't see, when I hear gun violence, I don't think of suicide, but it's all lumped together. But anyway, so found out real hard and real fast that there was no real answers to this, and there was no way you could throw money at it, which then forced me to kind of say, all right, well, what anyone can give money to the mental health community. What are the things that we can do as an industry, as a 2A community? How can we work with the things that we can agree on with the mental health community, right? And that was a turning point for the organization, because I started coming up with some ideas that were a little bit out of the box. And one of them we've discussed before when we've talked is free and anonymous mental health screenings. You have a band on right now. That band is how I started. That was the first program that Walk the Talk America had. It says, take a free and anonymous mental health screening, go to WTTA.org/love. I started passing those out at gun shows out of my booth, just to test the temperature of the water for people. How were they going to react? And what's crazy is our community, the 2A community, we needed it the most, because by nature, we're protectors, we're tough. We also don't want to lose our firearm, so we never show weakness, right? Even when we're we're in crisis, sometimes we just kind of white knuckle it and push through. And when I was passing that band out and talking about guns and mental health and suicide prevention and everything like that, it was insane the type of response that I was getting from people who were just walking by. People would just wanted to share their story, whether it was for suicide loss survivors or people that were on the brink and came close to doing something tragic. But that was the first program, and it was the first introduction to kind of bringing guns and mental health together into the 2A community, and basically saying they're not mutually exclusive. Like, just because we're afraid to lose our rights doesn't mean that we don't have the right to kind of be in crisis and to kind of say this is an issue and we're going to hit it head on and get in front of it and own it, so you can't use it against us, and show how much it means to us, right? Because let's face it, I owned a gun company, and for years, every SHOT Show, every NRA show, if anyone's ever been to any of those shows, a majority of the people are walking around either are active duty military, first responder, or a combat vet, right? They gravitate towards our industry. And every year that I would be in my booth, it seemed like we would lose someone. You'd be like, "Oh, where's Rick?" And it's, "Oh, you didn't hear about Rick? Oh, he took his own life." Like, it's one of those type of deals. So it's just like, we know that suicide by firearm was going to be used against us. So I feel like we always kind of shied away from discussing it and talking about mental health, because it's like, we don't want to lose our rights. We have a lot to lose, that type of thing. But now I feel like as an industry, we've come such a long way. Like I said, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, I don't think you would ever have booths that dealt with mental health or anything like that. And now you're seeing organizations like NSSF, Walk the Talk America, you kind of preach that whole thing too. It's right up your alley, right? Hold My Guns. Like, you're seeing these organizations come forward and saying like, no, we have to talk about mental health. Does that make sense? Like,
No, absolutely. And that's why I'm a big proponent of this. I've been touched, many times by suicide in my own life. I had a coworker that I roomed together on the road. I looked at him like he was a son, and we worked very closely together. And I remember, he had a breakup. He was young. He was 21 years old, and, he took his own life. And I remember going to his funeral and speaking at his funeral and then seeing the casket. It was an open casket, and it was just like he was asleep when we were on the road together. It was like he looked very peaceful, and so that was something it's touched my life. And it was, obviously with what I do with the kids, we kind of work, hand in hand, and everything is about, preservation of our rights by, proper education, safety education and stuff like that. So it's something that I've been aware of, and self-aware. And part of what I do is I'm self-aware. Like, and one thing I want to talk about to my people here is it's okay to not be okay. And so obviously we have to look at, what we can do in our everyday life to get through these short times where we could have somebody that's in crisis, or we could be in crisis. And so one thing that's brought up here is a really great point, is there's actually, it's against the law for me to hand my gun to somebody that's not my family, because of a bill that was passed a couple years ago, which deals with the storage and the transfer laws. And so before, I used to be able to sell a gun to somebody, and I didn't have to have a background check. We'd meet in parking lots, and we'd say, "Oh, you got a CHL? Cool. I got a CHL too." And we'd sell the gun. We give them a bill of sale, and that was it. Well, this new law changed that, and so with this, like, there's people that are in crisis, but they can't offload their guns. And so we worked really, really hard in this session to try to introduce something. I didn't, but I knew of a group that, Donna Marie, like, her group was trying to modify the language to make it so we could transfer a gun in a moment of crisis. And unfortunately that hasn't moved, and, it is what it is. And so, one thing we've talked about is, hold my barrel, right? So, like similar to hold my guns, but, if we can take away the firing pin or the slide, or take the barrel out of the gun and give that to someone, then that'd be a way to help create time and space between that incident. And so, that's the problem, is bad legislation leads to higher rates of suicide. And, we're looking at what's happening in the state. We have a huge issue with, fentanyl, drug abuse, homelessness, bad economy. So all these things are leading to an uptick in suicides. And so, that's why, kind of practicing what I preach. Like I do, and this is between me, you, and everybody that's watching, is I do a mental health screening on their website once per quarter. Even if I don't need to do it, it's just something, it's like paying my insurance. And, I talk about self-awareness is I have a lot of stress. I don't know about you, Michael. Like what we do is very stressful because there's lots of deadlines. There's lots of, outside influence on what we're doing. And so it's okay to get down. We get down. It's part of life. Everybody gets down. Everybody has a hard day. And so part of that is making sure that we know, what to do when we're going through these situations. And that's what I really appreciate what you guys do, and can you talk about kind of what it looks like for you guys, what you guys do?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I kind of want to touch on something about what you said about checking in on yourself, because I think that's like super important, because as gun owners, like, and people who train and prepare and we take courses and we do, right? Like, what are the things that every gun owner, like when we meet each other, we know, right? We know we're all in on it. It's like safety. Like when people are like gun safety, it's like, yeah, we're some of the safest people in the world. Like we literally can watch movies and we can like see when people have bad trigger discipline or muzzle flash somebody, like we're really good at that, right? So we know safety. And anybody who takes a course that's like becoming part of the 2A community, right? That's what's going to get beat in their head in their class, like safety. The second thing that they're going to have that's going to get beat into their head, and I've gone and spoken in front of different people at different events, and they always have a lawyer there to talk about what happens in a defensive shooting. So this lawyer comes up and he basically tells you, or she says, like, it's not going to all be butterflies and rainbows. You don't get to just shoot somebody and walk away from it unscathed, even if they're breaking into your house, right? So we're very aware of that. And I think that helps us understand like that responsibility piece, right? As a responsible gun owner, like you can't just brandish your firearm. You can't just shoot anybody just because of this, right? You understand that there are some consequences that are going to come along with it, right? And that's all about being prepared. And now to close it out, I think that as gun owners, we all need to have a mental health and suicide prevention plan. That should be just part of the curriculum, right? It should be addressed when we're taking the CCW course. It should be, hey, cool, you're a gun owner, right? Most likely you're never going to be in a defensive shooting. The odds, right? Most likely you're going to turn the gun on yourself in a time of crisis. So if you're aware of that and you have a plan, and like you do once a quarter, I'm going to go in there and just check on myself, even though nothing is wrong at the moment. Like I feel pretty good about life. I'm still going to check on myself, because that band, that screening, you don't have to give them any information you don't want to, right? And you can go on there and they have them for 12 different things, or 13, I think, I believe, and a couple of them are in Spanish, right? But it's like anxiety, depression, right? So whatever you feel like you want to check yourself out on. And for those that think like, hey, what is that really going to do? I have seen the power that has when someone finds out that they only have mild anxiety, right? Not high anxiety. So don't underestimate that. Go get yourself checked out. And that's part of your gun owning plan, right? That's the better mental health and suicide prevention plan. So like I have a plan with my family, with my wife. I have a plan. If she ever feels like I'm down or depressed and she's uncomfortable, we have a plan for that with the firearms, right? And it's between me and her. And we're good. So I think that that's part of just being a responsible gun owner. And I think now we can face that. I'm reading one of the users, red flag laws combined with safe storage laws are counterproductive. Absolutely. Right. And it's feel good legislation that is actually creates barriers to entry. Like that is, and that's what guys like me and you got to keep, because we're the ones that have access to these people we're invited to these parties that people could barely, sit through. They wouldn't want to, right? Yeah. But we're the guys that sit there. It's like, okay, I'm going to listen to you, but now I'm going to tell you about our world. Right? These are things that prevent people from getting help,
And so, this comment, why I highlight, this is Alicia. She's one of my friends. She's helping us with, the equity standpoint of what we're doing in Oregon. Right. And she has some really brilliant stuff that she does for us and help as, and we're all coming together as a collective to make this situation better. Obviously we have super high rates of restriction right now. We're getting ready to go to federal court next week, which I'm going to spend the whole week up there in Portland. And so there's a lot of things that are happening. And, this, what you brought up is it's a feel good measure. None of these laws are going to do anything to actually help the situation. They're going to make it everything harder because we're not talking about the real problem. We're not talking about mental health problems. We're not talking about any funding for, any kind of mental health anything in our state of Oregon. We're just we're going to put another law in place and we're going to ban this. We're going to take that away. And so this is another thing right here that I want to highlight is the stigma, right? There's a stigma right now that's happening. And I see it, in the schools, I see it in the doctor's offices, I see it at OHA, the Oregon Health Authority. And what they do is they've introduced this new checklist, and it's part of the screening process when they take you in. Like if you go to the doctor, they're going to ask you, do you have any firearms in the home? Are they properly stored? And it's probably not going to be like that. But that's what they're actively doing to children. They're actively doing it to people that go to the doctor. They're doing that at schools. And so this is stuff that puts, us as gun owners in a position where we're playing defensive because we don't want to tell, our doctor that we have firearms because really, I mean, at the end of the day, it's none of their business. And so this kind of what this does is this puts up a wall where we can't get the help that we need at that time because we don't feel like we have any options. And so that's why, what you do is really, really important. It's about bringing awareness to this and giving people options where we don't have to depend on the government for these kind of solutions. We can depend on private organizations that have a lot of experience, that have been vetted and are actually doing the work to help save lives.
Yeah, I think it's and you're right. If I had $1 for everybody that contacted me and said I went to see a doctor the other day and they asked me if I have firearms, why did they do that? And then, I'm always told like the person like I just lied and I'm never going back, right? Like
Yeah.
which no one wants to live like that. That's not a way to live. But that's the thing is like whether it's malicious or the person is just ignorant in the way that they're asking, it's a problem, right? And that's one of the things. I mean, you've helped me out when we actually taught in Oregon. We actually threw a cultural competence course for healthcare providers, and you were a big integral part of that when we did it up in Oregon. But that's one of the things we go over is like think about the way that you present, the way you ask somebody about their firearms, and understand what you're doing. And we had people that said, I have to rethink the way that I'm approaching that because you're right. Some of them are just ignorant. They just didn't even know that that's something that we'd be afraid of. But that goes back to us just kind of always circling the wagons and not. I feel like one of the things that the 2A community has been horrible at, and if I was going to put a knock on it, is kind of explaining the issues we have in a calm manner, which can be very difficult when you're being judged simply because you own a firearm, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I when I first got into this industry, I didn't know. No one told me that someone could hate you just because you own a firearm. Like I didn't know that, right? So I remember the first time that I found that out the hard way. I mean, I have a funny story. The very first
I have many of them actually.
No, the very first NRA show that I went to, no one warned me. They told me they're like there might be some protesters out front of the NRA show, and I was like, huh. I'm like, okay. Like I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what that meant. And I remember I was walking, getting ready to go to the booth in the morning. This guy had a sign that had a deer that was like slaughtered, and I stopped and I like looked at it, and I was like, oh, that's a shame. Because I'm just thinking about that animal. And the dude looked super puzzled and confused. And I realized he was looking at my badge, right? And he was like super confused because I didn't know he was one of the protesters. So it took me like 10 minutes. As I walked out, I was like, that guy's a dick. And then I kind of was like, oh my God, that was one of the protesters, right? Like I didn't know people could hate you for owning a gun. There were many times I met a girl at the bar thinking I met my future wife. And then as soon as I told her I worked in the firearms industry, she acted like I was a Lord of War or something like
Yeah.
that.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
legally, like, what are you like? We agree on 20 other things. So, there is that stigma, and people do judge you. It's tough.
Well, you've never lived a life until you get multiple death threats because you want to work with children and protect them from accidents with a gun. And that's something, they literally hate me and what I stand for because I want to protect children. And this is something that I'm very careful on with the way I move in public because of this. It's a real thing, and and it comes down to mental illness. It's like the people that wish death upon me or you because of what we do, we could admit that they're not all there mentally, right? This is something that to back to your point where we're talking about that event that we did together up in McMinnville. That was a really fun day, and I still interact with them every month, and I'm part of the board when it comes to the Oregon Firearm Safety Coalition. We're basically a nonprofit that does suicide prevention in Oregon, and so I'm part of that group, and just seeing the growth from that lady that I helped, and her name is Susan, and she's become a good friend of mine, and
AR. Wasn't it
yeah, with
the
the
AR?
R. Yeah,
Yeah.
so so this lady, she works for the VA, and so she is a clinician for the VA, and she's got a very soft voice, a very small stature, and at the class, I was handling a 300 blackout suppressed, and I had an AR-15, and I was talking about nomenclature and the functions, and I was doing this in a room full of doctors and clinicians, and these people have never ever seen this type of gun. They've only heard about it on the news. They've seen it in articles that they've read, but they've never seen one in person. And so that's why it was so important for us to be there as gun owners and instructors, is because we were able to present the information in a way that they could understand it. And this lady in question, Susan, she actually got up, and we documented her shouldering this AR pistol, which was in 300 blackout with a suppressor, and then also with the rifle. And I showed her about muzzle discipline, trigger discipline, how to check it for clear, and all these things. And she left that event and sent me an email, follow-up email, saying thank you for that, because without this education that she had gotten from us and what we were doing there, like, she would never have been able to get through to her clients at the VA. And so that's what, like, we were able to break down these walls and make it so they're going to be better at their jobs, so they can help save our veterans, which we lose over 22 veterans a day. They say 22, but it's closer to 50 a day. And so that's what's really, really important, is just being able to have these conversations. And I know it's not an easy conversation to have, especially because we want everybody to be safe. That's why we carry a gun. I carry a gun everywhere daily because of I want myself safe, and I also want people around me safe. But we also have to understand it's a law of averages. And that's when we talk about the suicide aspect of this. Is the people that are gun owners, they have the highest rate of suicide with a firearm because they know that it's lethal. They know that they made this decision. It's temporary decision that lasts them the rest of their life, and they know it's going to be fatal because they've made this decision, even though typically it's an impulsive type situation, because they don't necessarily know how to deal with the chaos in their lives. And so that's why I'm so excited to have this conversation with Michael, because Michael, like, literally, of all the people that I've had on so far, like, he's my one of my best friends out of this situation, but also the work that he's doing really is going to help impact the state. And so I put up his website, and I'll highlight it again. And so, you can go here. It's all anonymous. You can go here. It doesn't cost you a penny. It doesn't cost you any time to go there, just to see that there's help available. And this is stuff that we can put in our circles, right? Our circle of friends, where we could blast this email or this website out. And it's not a judgmental thing. It's just something, hey, here's a resource for you. If you are having a hard time, this is how we can get help. And we can just talk about it. And so I'm going to continue to let you go. But that's something that's I wanted to kind of bring up.
Yeah. On a side note, just to talk about, you said her name was Susan, right?
Susan. Yeah.
Yeah, Susan. So we ended up crossing paths on some kind of Zoom call at some point. And it was funny because she's like, "Do you remember me?" And I was like, "Yeah, you were in Oregon." And she was like, "Yeah." And she was like telling me about how she goes to the range now. Like she actually shoots. So like, like I don't know if I ever told you that, but it was really
No.
yeah. So she was like her and the other person that was on the call was like, "Oh, like we go to the range and we've been to the range a couple times and stuff like that." So she went from being someone that wasn't even going to hold the gun, or like everyone. I remember because I think it was Donna who was like, "I'm so shocked she's up there right now talking." What I mean? Like that goes to show you though the power of like just I think the way that we present ourselves in this course, or at least that day too, it just makes people comfortable. And that's the thing is you got to get people who aren't, they got to get out of their comfort zone, but they need you to be able to pull them in there. You know what I mean? So retools the way they think, But one of the things I want to talk about, which I think is important, and it's kind of my latest project, or the WTTA's latest project, is and it's moving slow, but we're getting there. We're getting like at least one every couple weeks coming forward. Is our directory of mental health clinicians that are culturally competent in firearms culture, right? And that's super important because I think the more we get the Jake Wiskersons, and for those of you who are listening that don't know who Jake is, if you get involved at WTTA or you follow WTTA, Jake is a major player in the organization, but he started as just a straight mental health clinician who had me on his mental health podcast. And before we went live, he was like, "Hey, I got to tell you something. I have a concealed carry license and I'm into guns, but we can't talk about that."
Yeah.
Right. He was closeted. And then, as we developed a relationship after he saw what we were trying to do, he was like, "I want to be involved." And he thought like, "Hey, why am I hiding in the shadows? Like, I know my people, the mental health kind of healthcare provider people tend to frown on firearms," but he's like, "We're never going to change anything if we don't come forward." So having said that, like here we are, a few years later, building out this directory, trying to find mental health clinicians. So if anybody on here is a mental health clinician that wants to be listed, please get in touch with us. But what I want to do is build a network of clinicians to come forward to say, these are the people that are culturally competent. They're going to understand everything that you're going through. If you say to them, "I had anxiety today and I went to the range and I shot off 1,000 rounds," they're going to be like, "How do you feel?" Right? Like, feel better, right? Like they're going to understand all the nuances of we as gun owners, the things that what makes us tick, what we enjoy, the fact that, just because you own 50 guns doesn't mean you're nuts. You're normal, right? Like
That's pretty normal to me.
Yeah. Right. Like, and it's funny because those are the things that we face, right? Like, I all the time, like people don't realize, they're just like, "Why does anybody need that many guns?" And I'm like, "I have that many guns." And they're like, "Oh," I'm like,
Because we can.
Yeah. Why does anyone need that many pairs of shoes? I mean, we could do this all day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Alicia brought up a really good point about the OHA. So OHA is the Oregon Health Authority. And so they're the ones that are in charge of setting policy when it comes to, what's considered quote unquote secure storage in the state of Oregon because of that statute, that law that went into effect last year. It's Senate Bill 554, which requires secure storage of all of our firearms at all times if they're not on our person. And so their definition of secure storage is a cable lock, trigger lock, a gun vault, a gun safe, or a gun room. So you don't know this, Michael, but you actually have a gun room in your home, because their definition of a gun room is a room with 4 walls, a ceiling, and a locked door. So all of our homes identify or self-identify as gun rooms. And this is not legal advice, by the way. I'm just pointing out the fact that they don't know what it's like to be a gun owner. And so I think that's kind of been the biggest thing for me in doing what I'm doing here in this group is changing the way we're being perceived by those that don't understand us as gun owners, right? I'm very, very local, vocal. I'm very loud and proud that I'm a gun owner, because it's part of my everyday life and it's part of my hobby. It's part of my my profession. It's all these things that are intertwined when it comes to guns. And so I feel that we get a bad rap. And I feel there's people that don't understand this because they don't want to take the time to get to understand this. And part of it is the way we kind of put off this vibe where, we might not be the most approachable in certain circumstances. I mean, I get it. There's different people out there that have different ways of doing things. And at the end of the day, we all just want to be left alone. We don't want more restriction. We you know what I mean? That's why the self-awareness part's really, really important, is because if we can do our part to help make sure that our neighbors are safe, our family members are safe, we're safe when it comes to our mental health, we're going to get less heartache from the politicians, right? So if we can self-police ourselves and have, this information like the Walk the Talk America in our forefront, right? Mm-hmm. The less governmental intervention we're going to get, at least we hope, right? And so, one thing that I, working with kids, and I see a lot is teen suicide. Teen suicide is way up. And it's because of the way social media is affecting young minds. It's way, the cyberbullying. There's all these different things that are happening and affecting the youth. And so I think that's where, what we're trying to do here to just kind of bring this all to the forefront is we have to understand, that there's good versus evil right now. There's people that are, on our side and are trying to do the right thing. There's other forces, like big tech would be one of them, that are using social media and all of this stuff to influence our behavior and modify our behavior, which, in turn makes us more, either could stress us out and put us in a position where, we need these kind of critical services. So do you have any advice for people on, what's the first step?
Stay off social media.
Stay off. You heard it here first on social media.
Social media, stay off.
Yeah.
No, my biggest advice for your mental state and social media does play a massive part in people's frustrations and their mental health, right? It really does. So I get it. No one's staying off social media, and those that do, I'm super proud of them. But I think they're weird, right? It's like sometimes it's frustrating. Like some of my friends that don't have any social media, I'm jealous, but at the same time, I get frustrated. But I will tell you this: the algorithms, right? You find that it's constantly sending you and putting things in your face that's going to infuriate you, right? You got to be aware of that, right? And you just got to understand that not everybody's out to get you, right? As gun owners, this is the problem. I think we have this issue where we kind of we get in our echo chamber and we hear the same things over and over again. And then what happens is we kind of get defeated. Like, oh, you can't change their minds. And that's why I love what you do. Because I've been on Zoom calls with you, and you basically told me it's like me and you, brother. Like everybody else here is pretty much. But you still have to show up to those things. You have to show up to those events that are out of your comfort zone to kind of don't let other people control the narrative. Think about what I did when I went to go speak at that Moms Demand Action event when I got invited and paid, to go up there and speak. Yeah. I took a lot of crap from doing that from some of the gun people because they're like, what is he doing? But the whole point is not only, and we've had these conversations in private, not only did I learn some of the tactics that the Moms Demand people had, right? But I also, as they let me go first, was able to control the narrative.
Absolutely.
In front of a bunch of students and bring it back to suicide prevention as opposed to let's stop blaming this scary rifle for all the world's problems, right? Yes. So I think that's important. You just got to make sure you step out of your echo chamber.
And that's what I learned at the beginning of my career doing what I do from going to Moms Demand Action meetings. I spent a lot of time on the opposite end of the table from them, just so I can figure out, what their fears are. That way I could tailor my approach to reach their children. Because I knew from a very, very young time in doing what I was doing is I knew for a fact that just because they didn't have guns or were afraid of guns, that there wasn't going to be a time that their kid could come in contact with a gun somewhere else. And so that really helped me get the infrastructure in place to do what I do today. I would not be as an effective as an advocate today if I would not have gotten uncomfortable in the beginning and go to these events. And I've walked with them in events and listened to them speak. I've been through all of this stuff, and it's not a comfortable position to be in. And not everybody can do it, and it takes a lot of self-control. There's a lot of time where I have to bite my tongue, and I can't be vocal about what I truly feel, because I'm just trying to not make the news, right? I don't want to be that guy, you know what I mean? And so, that's what's really, really helped me. And that's what I'm trying to do here is show, my people here that, there's different ways to do things, and there's ways that we haven't tapped into. And if we can do them, and if we can just make a little cultural shift, this is where we're going to pick up the middle. And this is where we really need the middle. There's a lot of moderates out there that are gun owners. There's and a lot of times they talk about, Democrats and all this other stuff. This is not a left versus right issue. This is like, there's every part of the spectrum that own guns and have guns, and suicide affects everybody, right? So there's not a single person probably in this group. There's almost 80,000 of us that hasn't had somebody in their life that's been affected by suicide. It's just the numbers don't support that. And so, that's kind of where, we have to be more vocal about, the help that we can get people as well. And so, part of social media, they use the division to sell ads, right? It's all about profiting. I saw a TED Talk years ago, and it talked about a behavioral modification empire. That's what they called social media. And so as soon as I heard that on that TED Talk, I changed the way I viewed social media, right? So I don't get fired up on social media anymore. I'm very, because I see what it's designed to do. Like, I'm careful with the stuff that I put out, because I see how it drives algorithms, right? I don't want to be a divisive person. I'm trying, like, it's really challenging. I see memes. I love memes, and I can't share them because I'm like, oh, how would my people think of that? And it's just part of this journey as I figure out, who I am and how I fit into this life.
Yeah, it's because I know what you're talking about. There's a couple times I wanted to share something. I'm like, no, don't do it. Because there's a lot of work that we've done, and we've gotten to places where, and this is what I try to tell everybody. I love, I try to give advice to people, especially ones that are starting their own 501c3s and stuff like that. Like, I'm like, look, not everyone needs your opinion on whatever it is, right? Like, because that's the way they see you, right? Like, they see you as the guy who's helping children and educating their parents about responsible gun ownership. And you know what I mean? Like, it's like, you don't want to turn off. You're trying to help people, and that's fine. Like, some people probably want to alienate themselves into an echo chamber and just kind of be like, this is, but like, the work that we're doing to get it on a global level or a national level, right? Like, you just really can't get involved in that stuff, and you have to, and it's not about being soft, and it's not about, the private conversations or the things that we laugh at, but it's literally about, look, I want a spot at the table, and that table, and that's it's metaphorically speaking, right? That table, there's a certain way you can carry yourself and get there. And then once you're in, and you're in that inner circle, then you can start playing with people's ideas in a graceful manner and sharing your own and kind of educating people, right? And that's the way you do it. Because I can't walk in a room and have someone be like, this guy's a blowhard, or this guy's this. It's like, I need this person to be like, all right, I'm listening. Okay, I did that. That's kind of cool. Like, I can relate to him here. And then once we build that trust, then it's like, okay, now you go, right?
Absolutely. So in your journeys, what's like, if you were to look back today on, where you've come from, what's a memory that really sticks out for you? What's a really cool experience that you've had doing what we do?
It was the White House, man.
The White House.
The White House. Well, See, that's a hard question for me because this is what has kept me going all these years, is because there's always seems to be something that happens. But I'll tell you why the White House was important. First of all, there's no way an idiot like me should have been invited to the White House. Right?
No comment.
Yeah. So like that part, because I remember when I got the invitation, I was kind of like, okay, these like Ashton Kutcher's about to jump out here or something, like, and be like, but being able to show my daughters, like, your father built something, and a year later, because it was 18, I got to the White House at 19.
Wow.
Right. So a year later, I was already at the White House. And it's kind of funny because the organization itself has come so far. They took me into the White House when I was very green. You know what I mean? Like, we had some programs, but we weren't who we are today. But and here's the part about the White House that was really cool, besides just going to the White House, right? It was being in a room full of some of the most brilliant minds in epidemiology and healthcare and in the VA, and realizing NSSF isn't even here. I was like the only gun industry person. There were pro-gun people there. There were soldiers, and you know what I mean? But I was literally the only person from the firearms industry in that room. And when we had to give our little TED Talks or whatever, I had ended mine with, the gun industry can help you, but you can't make us a villain anymore. And cut to, here we are years later. At that time, the VA wasn't even involved in the gun industry. They couldn't be. Those same people are now attending SHOT Show, and NSSF is giving them a booth. So you get your Dr. Matt Millers. I mean, I'm going to throw out names that mean nothing to people, but I'm just telling you, like, these are people that are in the VA. So now we've bridged that gap, right? Now we have the VA involved in the firearms industry. So to me, there's some conglomerates that I'm on when we're working on some pretty big projects that I can't really talk about now in terms of like the direction of where it's going. But it goes back to that spot at the table, that now there's these organizations out there that are like, we got to talk to these guys. Walk Talk America needs to be there because we don't want to insult or offend gun owners, right? We want to make sure that we're providing the right message. I think the White House, to me, would have been the biggest deal. And I didn't know how I got there. You know what I mean? I think it had something to do with Diana Muller saying something. You remember when she was like, Walk the Talk America?
Yes.
I think that put it on the radar, because when I kept asking the people at the White House, how did I get here? And they were like, because you're you. And, they did the stupid answers.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, seriously. Like, how did I get there? And they're like, because you're you. Like, they wouldn't tell me exactly how I got there. Yeah. I feel like I got there because of that,
And so, that's what's really, really important. And so, Gun Rights Policy Conference, I'm talking about it, where I opened it up to people, and I'm hoping to have people there, because I've been going there since 2017. I've met great people there. That has opened so many doors for me. And one of my stories that I remember is back in 2018. I was still green. No, it was in Phoenix, so it was 2019. Excuse me. That's when I saw you, 2019. And so anyways, I was invited to go, because I did a presentation at AmCon, which was a Friday before GRP started. And at that presentation, I got kind of shoulder tapped by somebody and said, Diana Muller really liked what you said, and she would like to talk to you. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a big deal. And Diana Muller, I don't know if you guys are familiar with her. She runs the DC Project, and she's a world-class shooter, and she's just a solid lady. And so I went to dinner with her that night. It was her, it was Dr. John Lott, it was Holly Sullivan. There's a couple other people there, but we helped because she had a testimony on that Tuesday after the conference in front of Congress on the assault weapons ban. And so, basically the gist of the story is, I'm in the parking lot of a Mexican restaurant. She's on her Apple computer, and John Lott and I are helping develop her speech for that testimony on that Tuesday after. And so I'm just some dude from Eugene, Oregon. I'm some dude that works with kids and loves to protect kids. but it put me in this position where now I have the ear of Dr. John Lott, and now I'm networking with him. And so she shouted out our organization out, 3 or 4 times in different hearings up there on the Hill. And that's a tremendous honor and it never would be possible if I didn't make that change in myself and change the way others saw me as a gun owner. And that's where because I was a gun owner. I used to be a hunter. I used to do all this stuff. And then I became an instructor and all this, and here we are today. And so, but where I am today is light years away from where I used to be. And so that's what I try to do here with you guys, is to show you that all we have to do is polish. You have this beautiful rock, right? And you just have to polish it, and you have to hone it, and you have to make it look. And once you get this beautiful polished rock, which is what I feel today. I mean, obviously I still make mistakes. I'm still not perfect. There's still things that I need to work on, but I still put in that work every day to make sure that I'm going to get better. So in 2 years or 3 years, I'm going to be light years ahead of where I am today. And so that's why I say this, like everything I'm doing, this is not the destination. This is just a journey. And part of that is making sure that I'm aware of my mental health. I take in positive stuff and I put out positive stuff, and I don't dwell on negative stuff. I don't allow negative stuff into my thought process and my psyche, because it's really, really easy, especially right now. It's really easy to feel defeated. It's really easy to feel like things are not going the way you want them to go. And it's easy to get dejected and feel like the weight of the world's on your shoulders. And that's what causes people to do things that they're going to regret. And one thing about suicide is it lasts a lifetime. The grieving process is not something that will end. I woke up Saturday morning to a message from a guy, and I'm trying not to get emotional, but his daughter took her life in 1997. And so they started an organization, and their organization's about mental health and all this stuff. But it's 26 years later, he's still struggling with that loss because he left his gun unsecured, and she used his gun. And so that's one thing to think about is we have to understand how our actions are perceived by others, but also how our actions can affect others, and especially our loved ones. So
Yeah.
Off my soapbox.
No, it's real, man. Hey, like this last weekend was tough for me, because the president of my company, right? One of the reasons why I'm here today is that, and I probably should have shared this in the beginning when I was telling the story, but one of the driving forces for what I'm doing is because the president of my company, Bill Strominger, in 2009, took his own life with one of our firearms, right? And he was not only the president of my company, he was obviously a friend because I own the company, right? So my president, my friend, took his life with one of our firearms, and it affected me. It affected all of us. I handled it poorly because I didn't know what to do back then. Now I would have a completely different approach to how I would help my employees get through that, instead of being like, we got to move forward. Let's do this. Let's rearrange the, construction on the office and change there's just all these weird things that we did. Right. But, once again, those are, it's a statistic that's used against us. I hate that. But, we're coming, this is what I mean. It's like you said, you keep polishing, you keep swinging away. We're getting better at it, man. And we got to take it back. We got to take the negative stuff out of the hands of the people that use it against us. Like, think of the term, like when we see a sign that says end gun violence, what do we're like, oh boy, here we go again, some anti-gun shit, right? Or stuff. Right. And but it's like, we want to end gun violence too. Like, how did we let that phrase go that way? Right. Like, we want to end it. Right. We should be able to take that and use it. And that's what we got to do when it cut. And for everybody out there listening, I'm not delusional. Okay. I do not think we're going to bring suicide down. But what I'm here to do is try to reduce the numbers of suicide by firearm, because that's my industry. These are my people, right? They're my customers. And I think that we can do that. we got a much bigger issue, like as society. You know what I mean? But what do we
So,
read here? What do we
so
got here?
check this out. This is a really awesome comment. This is my friend Andy. Real tough. I see this a lot, and I see a lot where we look at Oregon. The demographics is typically it's going to be rural white males, typically 60 plus. The highest rates of suicide and teens. Those are the two biggest demographics in Oregon, and so a lot of it is the dementia. It's also we have working class generation that is at retirement. They don't feel useful. They feel that they can't do what they used to be, and so that's where they take their own lives. And so the dementia, the Alzheimer's, all of that stuff, that is a really, really important component of suicide prevention and a mental health awareness is, and coming as from as a son, right, Andy, is preventing access to lethal means is really, really important in this situation. We're not saying, like, I never ever want to talk about banning guns. I do not believe in banning guns, but I do believe that proper storage and being able, for children's sake, but also preventing our older loved ones from getting access to a gun to end their lives is really, really important. And so, is there anything you want to add to that?
Man, I think this goes back to as a gun culture, we're gonna have to face some things because this situation, first of all, he's not alone, right? Like I get a lot of that when people ask about
Very, very common. Very common.
yeah, very common, and it's almost like going back to what I said. We were hammered with the four safety rules and all the safety rules of guns. We hammered in our heads about what happens in a defensive shooting. And I think now we have to face the fact that we have to have a suicide prevention and better mental health plan, but also to have these discussions, like almost a checklist when you have a gun. Okay, there's a gun in the house. My dad and I, while he's still functional, and my mother and I, right? Like for my case, it would be my mom. We have to talk about what's going to happen if maybe her mind deteriorates and maybe come to that agreement that we're all comfortable with, right? And I think that's part of self-policing. But you have to have those conversations, man. And it rips my heart out when I see something like that because it's like you don't want to take away something that you guys have bonded on, or just something that means a lot to that person, right? The firearm represents something. It represents, uh, America. It represents personal defense and safety. It represents being in control in terms of like, there's a certain element of power as a gun owner that we have. We respect, right? We all respect that power. It's not we abuse it, but we know the power of a firearm. And it's like taking that away from someone saying, I don't feel like you're competent enough to have this gun. That's a very tough situation. So I think that these are things that need to be tackled super early. Like, I've grown, if my wife or my daughters were like, hey, dad, we need to, thinking about it now, if they're like, we need to talk about a plan in case something goes sideways mentally, I think that I can have that conversation with them now. But I think it's just like, that's a fear that we have to face as gun owners, right? And not be afraid to say to your dad, hey, dad, like you're getting a little forgetful. We have to do it with the car. You know what I mean? So why not have that conversation about the firearms? Who's going to take
So
what's going to happen?
there was a lady that I met a couple months ago. She contacted me for training, right? And so she lived rurally, and her husband, he just lost his driver's license because of dementia. And so she had to change, they basically reversed roles. So now, she's the protector. She was the one that goes to the grocery store. She is the one that drives him around because he's not able to, because his mind's going. And one of the things that she had to do is she had to, I told her, we're getting a good safe for this gun, and he's not going to know that you have this gun, because obviously with what was happening with him is her fear is that he was going to find the gun and then end up using it on himself. And so we worked together and we worked a plan and we got her the experience that she needed to feel like she could be the protector. And part of keeping him protected was making sure that he didn't have access to it. And just that helped her kind of put her mind at ease where she could feel that, you know, she was doing the right thing responsibly as a new gun owner and being the protector. And so, that's something that I've dealt with, uh, numerous times. I lost a friend a month ago to suicide, and I reached out to you guys. I said, hey, I lost a friend. And so I appreciate you guys, being there for me. And it never gets any easier, and it's not going to get easier because it's like, why couldn't they reach out to us, right? Like, why didn't they know that we love them and we care for them? Like, that's the biggest thing is we do all this stuff in our own personal lives because we want to save people. We like carry a gun, you know. Why why aren't we why don't people know about this stuff, I guess?
Yeah, dude. I've obviously thought about it a lot, and I will tell you this: I I don't think we could get in that mind frame. The way the way I look at it is people that have suicidal ideation are really going through it, and especially when that because usually you can have suicidal ideation for years, right? And never
Mhm.
act on it, and then one thing can happen and it triggers it, and then that's when time and space between you and your firearm, or time and space between what other method you're going to use of lethal means, um, is super important. But I look at it, and it's the only way I can make sense of it. It's like think about 9/11, right? When the planes crashed in the building, and then people were stuck, and
They
they
jump.
they either jumped or they burned,
Yep.
right? And that's the mindset. That's the only way I can make sense of it. That's what's going on in here, right? And fortunately, I've never gone there. Right? I've never been in that space, but I can appreciate that someone can get in that space because that's really the only way I can make sense of it. They're either going to burn or they're going to jump, right? And that's how much pain they're in. Um,
uh, and I'll never forget that. And one thing I want to get back to, I want to get back to 9/12.
yeah,
And I want to get back. I remember that, how everybody was united. We stand. Everybody had a sticker. Everybody was standing shoulder to shoulder. And that's the way I live my life now. Is I live my life like it's 9/12, and I'm trying to navigate these troubled times to bring people together. And that's why I'm lucky to have people like you in my life that I feel together. We're going to bring people together to help heal this country. And I don't know what that, I mean, it's probably bigger than us, but if we can have a hand in it, I think it's something that's really, really needed.
I appreciate that, man. So I'm reading this comment.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's highlight
This
this real quick.
suicide. Yeah. Yeah, I
This,
agree with
this
you.
this is for conversation, right? So everything we're talking about, this is all for conversation. This is not saying this is the right way to think about things, but there is validity, and I get it.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I agree. I do. Like, man, I think about, you know, so here's the deal. I think when people have to go, they want to go, right? And I get it. It's like you can't stop somebody from wanting to go. And I think about like I'm pretty lucky at my age. Like I'm still pretty healthy. I can move. I can do this, But if I was ever faced with something like, everyone's had that thought, like where you say, "I'd rather die," right? And you mean it. Maybe it's like if you can't walk or whatever,
yeah.
whatever it is important to you that could be taken away. Whether you did something or somebody just did something stupid, right? Um, assisted suicide. I just think everything, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here. Is like people have asked me before. So I have a bunch of different manufacturers that put this card in the box, right? And this card basically leads to the screenings, the mental health screenings. And what I always say to manufacturers is, don't you want to give your customer every opportunity to seek help, whether they just take a screening or they go further with it after they take the screening? Um, and most manufacturers say, yeah, like I do, like that makes sense to me, right? And I always say, look, even if you're not buying into what I'm saying, right, and you're worried about it, like think about what this does for you from a legal aspect when you get roped into a stupid lawsuit that says you advertised, stuff that like Daniel Defense is going
Yeah.
through, right? But I'm like, wouldn't it be great to look at the jury and be like, no, we give our customers the opportunity to get help. But anyways, back on track. What I'm saying about this card is people have said, like, you really think that card's going to make a difference? Like, I don't care. I don't care what you think or you think doesn't work. I want someone before they make that decision to have every opportunity to get help. And there's no reason why it can't be through the firearm. You know what I mean? And there's no reason why it can't be in the box. The Ruger, one of the people that is doing Arms Corps, High Point, Bersa, right? There's no reason, Century. There's no reason why they can't say, like, we provide this to our consumer so they have an opportunity to pause and say, like, maybe I want to go this route. I was about to go this dark route, but I saw this in the box. It's kind of cool, right? Like that's how I feel about assisted suicide. I believe that maybe it could be a positive thing for somebody, but as long as they have every opportunity to really think this through. Because like I said, I don't think you stop someone from, I know this is totally dark, but I've had this conversation many times. I don't think you stop somebody that's hell bent on doing it. And that's why I say, I'm not here to try to stop suicide. I'm trying to stop as many as I can. But my focus, because people are always like, why do you focus on the guns? What about ropes? Well, if I worked in the rope industry, I probably would do the same thing with ropes. But I'm from the gun community, and I look at this and say, we should be part of this solution. Like, we shouldn't let other people try to make solutions for us. Let's come up with our own. Let's come up with and see, dude. If I would have 5 years ago, if you'd have said, hey, do you think you can get them in the boxes of Ruger? I would have said no. Right?
Are they?
Yeah.
Are they in the box?
Ruger's going to have 2.1 million guns going out next year.
Wow, that's amazing, dude.
Right. So here we are making this shift, right? Once again, like getting this to I'm surprised I didn't tell you about that, but yeah, I was at the NRA show and they showed me the card.
A big deal.
Yeah, it really is though. It is. And it's just from the standpoint of, dude, as an industry, as a community, we should be super proud now that we're starting to step up and be like, okay, we got this. People who hate us, relax. We're doing this better than you. You know what I mean? Like, we have the space. Like, we have the ear of the people. But that's how I feel about the assisted suicide thing. Like, I think it's a great conversation to have, and I think these are the tough conversations you have to have because you have to think about these ways that I don't want to have dementia. I don't want my mind to go. Yeah.
Really. Well, we have to. I mean, our mind is a muscle. We have to exercise it, and that's everything that I'm trying to do here with everybody in the group. And they've given me a lot of trust because they listen, they tune in when I have alerts and I have action. They show up and they do the work, and so for that, I'm really, really thankful. That's part of this deal is like when you win. Like, I want to celebrate that. I want to celebrate my neighbors, my friends winning. I want like that's how we grow whatever we're doing, right? So if you're a guy that builds widgets and your widget is something that's going to help protect people or help protect our rights, like we need to celebrate that type of stuff, right? These are the victories that we're never, ever going to get unless we kind of nominate our own groups that are doing the work, right? And that's one thing I don't talk about the work that I do with the kids enough here. I mean, I do a little bit, but I don't think people understand like the picture, the big picture of what I do. The big picture of what I do is generational. This is the fight for our 2A rights. This is generational for us. And I don't want to get too political here because this is a different topic, but this is the way I view the suicide and the mental health part. This is like we're literally a generation away from losing our 2A rights. And part of it is because we're not reaching younger kids to get them involved in the shooting sports to show them how important these rights are. Plus, they're using big tech, they're using the media, they're using all this imaging and messaging, and they're using suicide as a catalyst to further take away your rights. And so that's the hard part, because how can you push back on that? How can you say that? How do you don't have an answer to suicide, because suicide is something that affects everybody. And for us to say, no, it wasn't the gun's fault, it makes it look like we're heartless and we're callous and we don't care about people and we just want people. We just love our guns more than we love people. And that's not the case here. And so I guess that's where I was going with this thought is just like, we are going to be stronger together. And so that means that we have to understand that we're all going to have ups and downs. We're all going to be good one moment, down the next, but it's how we deal with those situations. And that's why, it's been just over an hour here. I'm probably almost out of time with you, but like, in closing, I'm going to kind of wrap this up. Where do you see yourself? Because I always ask, because I look at this stuff from a generational standpoint, because of what I do with the kids. Where do you see yourself in, Walk the Talk in America in 2 years or 5 years when it comes to this stuff?
Oh God. I see Walk Talk America being an integral part and so I always look at like the 2A community and the industry is like, you have your freedom fighters, right? You have your Pride from My Cold Dead Hands guys.
Yeah.
They're out there like fighting the good fights in court, going on the
Mhm.
hill, like doing that battle. And then you have your other guys like us. And you actually bleed in more to like being in the battles more than I do. But I like being kind of the organization that moves in these circles where people, even anti-gun people, are like, I don't like guns, but I really dig what these guys are doing. You know what I mean? And so I just, the way I see it is really being a conduit to kind of bring people towards us and kind of say, okay, like now I'm seeing something in a different light. I see the, it's kind of like starting with seatbelts. At one point, like people were like, I'm not wearing seatbelts. And then all of a sudden, years later, it's like, I don't even have to tell my kids. They just do it naturally, right? It's like a
Mhm.
habit. And that's the
Mhm.
way I see people, gun owners in particular, being conscious of mental health, right? Like, so we're no longer being like, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about suicide. It's like, we're handling it ourselves. We're addressing it when we buy the firearm, and we're not going to be afraid to be like, we're coming to the table and talking about it. I think for so many years we try to dumb ourselves down. It was like, you can't sit with those people because they'll trick you. It's like, yeah, they can try. You know what I mean? But it's not going to work. You know what I mean?
No.
And that's when you bring it back into suicide, right? Because once again, you can't let people go on these rants and make bigger deals out of things that aren't the real problem, like feel good legislation and things like that. You have to bring them back to the places that are dark, which is suicide. And everything we've done, it's not working, right? We lose, I think it's 67 people a day to
Yep. Yep.
suicide. We have a mass shooting every day that nobody talks about, right? And when you bring people back to suicide, and then when you kind of like change the way you look at things, it's like you and I, right? When we look at a bill, what are the things we look at? We look at, how does it stigmatize mental health, right? And
Mhm.
how does it screw over the underprivileged, underserved people? That's how I look at things now, right? Because people don't
Yeah.
realize what they're doing because they're
Yeah.
not thinking. They're just thinking like evil gun. And we got to get better at that and say, like, okay, we're going to read these things and point out stuff and, um, you know, be there at the table. And where I see this
Oh,
in 5 years is omnipresence, man, everywhere, you know?
so this is a really good pamphlet. So I would love to get a copy of those. Like, you could email me and I'll put them in like a resource guide. What I'm going to do, since we're talking, is I'm going to create a mental health section in my resource guide up here. So I have resource guides. I can do anything in the group. And so what I would love to do is put a resource guide with all of your information so people can go there. Um, excuse me. They can copy and paste it. They can share it however they, obviously do it respectfully and make us all look good, right, as gun owners. But like, I'm going to create a mental health awareness like resource guide. And so we'll put your stuff in there. What does your pamphlet say exactly?
Are you talking about the one that goes in
The one you
boxes?
just held up. The one you just held
Oh,
up. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So just to read it off, it says, mental health. It's okay to talk about it. Everyone struggles sometimes. Sometimes we need help, and that's okay. as firearms owners, we often have a tough time admitting when we need help. And that is particularly true with our psychological struggles. One great way is to check in on yourself and your mental health state by taking a free and anonymous mental health screening. Walk the Talk America is made up of gun people who want to help other gun people while protecting your rights. Take a free and anonymous mental health screening at WTTA.org/love. Now,
Yep.
this card it's used by firearms trainers. It's used by firearms manufacturers, ammo manufacturers. This is kind of cool. Arms Corps actually puts the free and anonymous mental health screening on the side of their box of ammo. So
That's awesome.
like,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
we're going deep, right? But
Yeah.
what's cool is every organization takes the back and makes it their own. So like for gun shops, what we usually do is have mental health clinicians who have taken our cultural competence course, stamp the back of it, and then they make relationships with their local gun shops. So the gun shop has a connection to a mental health clinician that's local, that's culturally competent in firearms, and they could use each other, or not use each other, but they could stay in contact with each other so if they ever have any questions, or they want to send one of their customers over, like, hey, check this guy out. He's cool. He's taking the culture. He knows about firearms ownership. You know, they're not sending him into a buzzsaw, right?
Yeah.
Manufacturers like Bersa did something cool. Bersa is a gun from Argentina, Latin America.
Okay.
They have a huge presence. When Bersa was like, hey, we want to put the card in the box, right? They're like, do you mind if we translate the front of this to Spanish? And I was like, dude, I love that idea, right? Arms Corps like shows basically all the other stuff they do for conservation, land conservation, like on the back. So it's just like really cool the way that people take that card and make it their own, but still
Yeah.
carrying that message of, check yourself out mentally.
Yeah, and so obviously we always got jokes in the chat. So in Oregon we decriminalize hard drugs, right? So methamphetamine, heroin.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, what could go wrong? And now we have all these crazy homeless people. It's wild, and we can't carry a gun, so it's great. It's a perfect storm, and so that being said is I really appreciate this conversation, and I'm almost done with the teen stuff that I'm working on, and so Walk the Talk America is going to be part of that. I want to have some of those cards where I can give them to families of teens, because we're going to be talking about teen suicide in these safety classes. So we have a teen rifle class right now. We have a teen pistol class, and we're working on a teen safety class, which would talk about, accident prevention. It would talk about, cyberbullying, anti-bullying, also would talk about, teen suicide prevention as well in the classroom setting. And so this is just another example of our organization providing value to the public, that's taking away from those that are trying to actually restrict your rights with a firearm. There's the Be Smart program by Moms Demand Action. Like, those are not viable solutions when it comes to the safety of our family and our kids. And part of this is we have to trust in these organizations like Walk the Talk America that are doing the work on our behalf as law-abiding citizens, and support them, right? So in closing, how can people get a hold of you? How can people follow you? And, how can people support the work that you're doing?
So just WTTA.org or walktalkamerica.org. You can go there. There's a lot. The website has a lot of information about we didn't even get on some of the programs we have and stuff like that, which is fine. Like, I don't want to bore you with that stuff. I think the conversations we have were actually made for better, I don't know, podcast or whatever live, but go to the website. On social media, it's at Walk the Talk US, and we're on Facebook, Twitter. I think we're on LinkedIn, and IG, Instagram,
IG.
right?
Yep.
You can get a hold of us any way on there. We're very responsive. I have 4 people that work the box and always look for stuff. So if you have any questions or anything like that, and feel free to ask us anything, man. I've been doing this for 5 years now, so it's there's no question that people ask people are, oh, how do you know that this information, if I fill out this screening, it doesn't go somewhere? It's hey man, if I would already cost somebody their gun rights, you'd know. We wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't be at year number 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
that would get
Yeah.
out super fast. So it's just like, I'm not afraid to challenge anyone who wants to challenge what I'm doing. I want people to understand what I'm doing. And I really feel like this is going to sound like I said, 5 years ago, this would have been crazy, but I feel like the gun industry could be on the forefront of better mental health and suicide prevention. Like we could be the leaders in it. And that's like a crazy thought, right? Because we always thought it was mutually exclusive, guns and mental health. It's like, no, we can combine the two and take over. Like I said, I think we have the space, we have the trainers, we have the ears of people. There's more gun neutral and pro-gun people, I think, than there are super anti-gun, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I think the gun neutral people are the ones that is the most important to understand we're doing something, because the perception, unfortunately, is that the gun industry doesn't do anything. And I want to change that perception. There you go. There's a 5-year plan, right? I want to change that perception.
Absolutely.
The gun industry doesn't do anything. And it's like, no, I already feel like we do. And it's just like, when I walk into the room, I'm just like, you know how it is. We go into these like conglomerates of groups that all are doing good work, great work. And I'm never going to disrespect what people do. But when I walk into that room, I'm like Ali in Olympic Village. Like, I'm just like, there's nobody here that's doing what I'm doing, and no one here is doing it better than me. So everybody's playing for silver medal,
Absolutely. That's the way I feel. That's the way I feel. And I know that if given the opportunity, I'm going to change the world. I feel that, and I know that, and that's what gets me going every day, is to knowing that there's little kids that depend on me to continue to keep going, because their lives matter and their lives are on the line. And it's my job to get to them to make sure that they're protected. And so that's why I'm thankful to have people like you in my corner. And so we're going to close this off. It's been over an hour and 15. I really, really appreciate you guys tuning in. This was a really, really important conversation. And I think what I'm going to close out is just know that we're always here for one another, and we're not going to suffer in silence. And, we're going to have, good days, we're going to have bad days, but at the end of the day, we're all going to get through this together, because we're all going to be here for one another. And so I suggest that, watch your circle of friends. Is there people that are having a hard time? And from time to time on my social media, I do buddy checks. Like, hey, how are we doing today? And I put it out there where I'm thinking about it, because I want other people to think about it as well. And I want it to go out and kind of spread that way. And just know that there's resources available. I'm going to put everything in this video. So you guys, and I'm going to create a resource page probably tomorrow with all of this stuff that I'm going to get from Michael. So we'll have, something that you guys can always refer to if there's something, and look for triggers in people's lives. It could be, it could be a financial, it could be, an addiction problem. It could be a marriage problem. It could be all sorts of different things, and just look out for one another. And so other than that, I'm going to get off here, and I really appreciate you, Michael, for taking the time and talking to us. And I'll talk to you guys again.
Yeah. Anytime.
So,
anytime.
Yeah. Have a good day.
Yep.
I'll talk to you soon. I'm going to end it right now.